Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome to another stream, session 14, in our journey to read the books of the Promised Messiah of Islam. I had taken a break for quite some time, about a year and a half, and back. So I did a quick stream last week and did some catching up. So I took the book of the Promised Messiah of Islam, which we're reading, which is Barahin-e-Ahmadiyya Part 5, and upload it into this product or this tool called Notebook LLM, and got it to summarize the first 500 or so pages, and did a pretty good job. So Notebook LM is the website or the product. You can just upload documents and then ask questions. So I uploaded Barahin-e-Ahmadiyya Part 5 and asked it to summarize the first 500 pages because that's where I had last left off, and it was a year and a half before, so I didn't remember some of the things. And actually, excuse me, I could probably get it to say the audio as well, so it could read it back to me. But I read it back, and it was a good reminder of the main parts of the book that we had covered, the overarching themes. So the Promised Messiah of Islam talked about the teachings of Islam, cleared the air on their perfect, defect-free teachings and comprehensiveness, and then discussed the importance of divine testimony through signs and miracles, and how there was a gap of 25 years prior to the other 4 editions or volumes of Barahin-e-Ahmadiyya, and the gap was necessary because it allowed many of the prophecies that were outlined in those books to bear fruit, and in the process expose his hardened enemies. And then we see what those prophecies are, and we examine them and how they came true. And those include the world turning towards him and his widespread fame. You can think about it. The Promised Messiah of Islam was born in Qadian. And Qadian is so one thing I like to do on these streams is like Google stuff, and that helps me understand the context within which this book and the time and the prophecies occurred in, and it makes things more real. And I like to visualize this stuff as well. So just checking. Sorry, I didn't check YouTube. Okay, so I've been live, and for some reason I'm not seeing. Oh, I do see it. Okay, sorry. I usually do a test of what I see on YouTube just to be absolutely clear. I'm not a professional, so there is some roughness around the edges with cameras, with lightings, with setup, and no, everything looks good. Everything's framed. Okay, as good as it can be for now. So going back to the point of Googling stuff and understanding, when you're reading these long books, it's helpful for me to do this. So I recommend, if you're doing the same thing in your own time, to also do the same. Or if you're joining me on this journey, to expect that. So Qadian is a town in the northeast of Amritsar, situated 18 or 11 miles, we're in the US, 18 kilometers northeast of Batala city in the state of Punjab, India. So Qadian is now famous for Promised Style Islam. So if we just take it at that level, his fame rose to being probably the most famous person to come from this town. All right. And now you can think about it and you can extrapolate to the fact that Ahmadiyya has reached the corners of the world, and his message has spread from this small town in Qadian, in India, in this area of Punjab, which has a population of 40,000 right now. So New York City. All right, Queens population 2.3 million in Queens, New York. Brooklyn 2.0, Manhattan 1.6. Manhattan is a small strip, and it has so like millions of people. 40,000 is like a Yankees stadium capacity. So there's less people in Qadian than there can fit in the Yankee Stadium where the baseball would be played. Okay, all right. Well, let's look at Real Madrid stadium capacity. Santiago Bernabeu is double that. So you can fill up half the stadium of one of the most popular international soccer clubs, football clubs, and you get Qadian population. And that's, I think, right now. So back then, I would think it was probably less. And so against all odds, and you see actually here the demographic, based on the 2011 census, there was 12,000 Hindus. Most the ratio is not that far off, slightly more male. And then there's Sikh, then Muslims. So Muslims are like not even the majority in this area. And then there's Christians, there's Jain. I mean, there's such a plurality of religions. So you can see here the breakdown. Islam is 13% in Qadian. So against all odds, being a minority, he has become the most famous person to come from that city, from that town. So going back to this prophecy, and you can see here actually when you hover over it, the citations, it'll take you to the page. So it's a really helpful tool, Notebook LM. So that was a prophecy. Another one was people coming to him in large numbers, to the extent of making roads rutted and causing him to nearly tire of hospitality. So imagine, I mean, folks talk about being going to a social event after work maybe, or on the weekend, and then coming home and hibernating for a few days just to like recover from the social exertion of force. Now imagine having thousands of people come just to visit you, and just think about like all the meetings. I mean, I'm at work, and I was actually doing my looking at the time this week, actually last week, and I work in an agency, so we have to do our timesheets because then we bill the clients. And I did about 15 hours of meetings. I've counted once 25, 30 hours of meetings, and meetings are exhausting. So imagine the number of meetings, the number of people he has to meet, and how exhausting that is. for him, and just being hospitable, like at your best behavior, like very nice and courteous, and not like it's superhuman almost. Like it's very hard, and um, a few people in the world are in this position who are just constantly like meeting people. So, anyways, that was another prophecy. Then there was financial support beyond imagination. I mean, if you search for largest mosque in Western Europe, pardon my spell, that's an Ahmadi Masjid, Beit al-Futuh. That's where our current Khalifa, Hazrat Mirza Ahmad, Ayyadullah bin Nasr al-Aziz, is. You can find him there every Friday giving a sermon that's televised around the world every Jummah. So till this day, we can see the evidence of these prophecies coming true. Migration of people to Qadian. So, like I said, that small town was probably even smaller, and so people came to who were called Ashab as-Sufa, and just to be with him, and I've met I once met a African American convert in Milwaukee at an event, local Ijtima event. Ijtima is like an event that we hold at the local, regional, and national level in any country in the United States, or any country in the world, sorry. Although what I said, sometimes it feels like that. Anyways, so the Ijtima was a regional Ijtima. I don't know why I actually was in Milwaukee. Yeah, that was wild because I didn't live in that region. But anyways, I ended up in the Milwaukee Ijtima once. I think that was Ijtima. It was many years ago. And I remember there was a speech that was, there was an African-American convert who spoke to us and told us about his history. So in St. Louis and that area, there's some of the pioneers of the Ahmadi Jamaat and their descendants live there. So, and I think that speech is available on YouTube as well. So anyways, he went all the way to Rabwa to meet the Khalifa of his time. I think it was the third Khalifa. I think he might have even met the second Khalifa. So he was very young. And so we have these African-American converts traveling all the way from the US to Khilafat to meet with and to learn from them. And then they came back and brought their lessons for the future generations. So the pioneer Muslims in America were made up, many of them were Ahmadi, and they traveled all the way to that part of the world. I mean, it's amazing. So we still see this migration happen today. God's promised to be his guardian and grant him success despite intense opposition from religious scholars and others who tried to destroy him. I mean, there was a case against him in court. There were several attempts at there was an attempt at his life. Like, there's a lot of that. So that's another prophecy. And all these they came true in his time, and some of them are continuing to bear fruit and multiplying the effect. And then there was this one prominent sign that kind of was eye-opening for me because I hadn't heard about it. It was the earthquake prophecy. So I remember us looking at Wikipedia, looking at that earthquake, and then comparing it to the Turkey earthquake that was devastating in a few years back, and it was around the same numbers of death. Like, so we actually did that analysis on Wikipedia, and I was just blown away. And he had prophesized that, and I remember trying to like ask the question of, in that moment, like, why would Allah give him this prophecy? Like, what's the purpose of that? And then he explains it that in those moments, like, it's a power that the presence of it just goes beyond like it's all beyond our human control, and it has such an effect that it can bring people together, and it could bring people to humility. It's such an amazing like fact of like human life that in those moments you'll see some of the most um hum- like humbling acts of service from mankind to each other in those times of need. So unfortunately sometimes it comes to that, to have our humanity show up and inspire others, because it's such a big event. So it's really the understanding of why this prophecy and why would like it just it's so there's a lot of spiritual lessons to learn from just reading this book and understanding these facts. And then he also then gave the examples of the prophets before him who went through similar situations as he did, and then he compares them, he compares their stories. And so that we went through that. So anyways, there was a lot of great stuff that we covered on the last um, stream, and we went through. And I remember like we went through the Quranic evidence and all this stuff, like because there was the death of Jesus alayhi salam, and the fact that he had died in Kashmir in India. We talked about that. Then this was really fascinating. The 6 stages of spiritual development is amazing. It's kind of like it helps us it gives us a practical tool to climb that ladder of spirituality to get closer to God. And he breaks it down in such a beautiful fashion. And then there's a few poems that are so beautiful. I remember actually getting emotional when I was I don't think you see it in the stream, but on the inside I was mushy and I was feeling emotional. And some beautiful words that he had put, like he was just a master. He had some beautiful poems. So some of them are documented in that book as well. And then we got to the point where we started going through the objections of his opponents at that time and his responses to their objections. And we realized that some of these objectors were founders of Islamic sects or movements that are in the millions today in the subcontinent. And so we Googled each personality. The first person actually was inconsequential, like the first person that he refuted. And I remember like looking at Googling his name, like there was no sign of him left. Like at least on the web that I could find. The guy's not famous. And it's so crazy how these people will make such a ruckus and brainwash a lot of people and lead people astray and then die, and like nobody will remember them, and their life was for naught. And so we're seeing that happen in real time today, with people who have a certain number of followings, and our Murabiyan, our volunteers, our scholars are doing an amazing job of exposing them day in, day out on the channels like True Islam UK. So definitely I recommend that you go out there, and if you're an Ahmadi, it's invaluable, because you'll learn how the enemy can twist and turn to try to manipulate you, and what the truth actually is behind all the facade. And then if you're not an Ahmadi and you want to know more, that's a perfect place to learn about the answers and the responses that we have that are grounded in Quran, Hadith, and other evidences that actually illuminate our understanding of Allah and Islam, rather than detract from it as our opponents would like to believe. So that was pretty much a recap of last time and what we've learned so far, the first 500 pages. We're going to continue with, another thing is, like, because it was such a long time, and our web teams are constantly like improving the experience. So shout out to them. They did an amazing job with this new reader that I realized that it's beautiful. It reminds me actually of the Quran. Our Quran apps are also very advanced, very helpful. That's how I personally read the Quran, digitally. And so I recommend you to check out our apps. And you'll notice, like, even when it comes to apps, our haters will be like downvoting them, and they're just like, it's just so sad. Like, get a life. We don't go to your apps and do that. Like, you just haters for no reason, but you can unlearn that. And this is a great place to come and learn actually what do Ahmadis believe, what did the Prophet ﷺ talk about, and then we can learn about how Islam, we can use it practically in our lives in this day and age, dealing with all the vices that we have, that we're being constantly under attack from, I would say. So anyways, this is the reader, and let me actually go reply to. So we were looking at, yeah, this is where we left off. So all right, so the reply to the doubts raised by Al-Khitab al-Mali fi Tahqiq al-Mahdi wal-Masih, a collection of Maulvi Rashid Ahmed Gangohi's absurdities. So number one thing is, I kind of forgot who that is. So one thing that is cool is you can do selectable text and copy this person's name and then search for it. Was a prominent Deobandi scholar from the Indian subcontinent. He was a leading figure in the Deobandi movement, a revivalist movement within Islam, Sunni Islam. That's his grave. So he was a Deobandi Islamic scholar, and Deobandi, for people who might not be familiar with it, is a revivalist movement within Sunni Islam that adheres to the Hanafi school of jurisprudence. It was formed in the late 19th century around Darul Uloom Madrasa in Deoband, India. So Deoband looks like to be a place, is a town and a municipality in the state of Uttar Pradesh, India, about 93 miles from Delhi. And Darul Uloom Deoband is an Islamic seminary and one of the largest Islamic institutions of India. And I guess that's the picture of it. The native Hindi Urdu name for the place is Devband. According to one theory, it derives from Devi, goddess, and Van, forest, when this place was full of forests in the Mahabharata. Okay, whatever. The 16th century Bhakti saint, Shri Harivansh Mahaprabhu, and the founder of this thing, which is a Hindu denomination, which began in 1535. The founder of this one Hindu denomination was based in this, lived in Deoband before his renunciation. He also established a temple here dedicated to Radha Krishna and named it Radha. Interesting. There are Radha and Krishna are central figures in Hinduism, embodying divine love and devotion. That's probably them. Looks like there's a drama, some movies. Oh, it's a combined form of the Hindu god Krishna with his chief consort and Shakti Radha. All right. That's enough of that. So this denomination began in 1535. I'm trying to see how big is it, if it's still around. It's 15 minutes till midnight too, so can be long on today's stream. So I'm going down these rabbit holes. Deoband is listed in Ain Akbari as a, okay, it's too much details right now. The learning okay, so this learning center was established in 1866 by Fazlur Rahman Osmani, Sayyid Muhammad Abid, Muhammad Qasim Nanotvi. I've heard this name for sure. He was an Indian Sunni Hanafi scholar, Hanafi Maturidi, Islamic scholar, theologian, and Sufi. He was one of the main founders of the Deobandi movement, starting from the Darul. So he was one of the main founders. Oops. Let's go back to the Deobandi movement. All right, the Deobandi movement. Their clerical wing was founded in 1919. So, okay, so this is what they oppose: the influence of non-Muslim cultures on the Muslims living in South Asia. The movement pioneered education and religious sciences through the Darse Nizami associated with the Lucknow-based ulama of Firangi Mahal, with the goal of preserving traditional Islamic teachings from the influx of modernist and secular ideas from during British colonial rule. Deobandi movements, blah blah. Okay, we already talked about that. And played a major role in the Indian independence movement through its participation in the pan-Islamist Khilafat movement and propagation of the doctrine of composite nationalism. Now, some of this stuff you got to take it with a grain of salt, because at the end of the day, these are human beings who are making these edits. In terms of jurisprudence, the Deobandis uphold the doctrine of taqlid, which is conformity to a school of thought, and adhere to the Hanafi school. Founders of the Deobandi school, Nanotwi and Gangoi, so these are the two founders, drew inspiration from the religious and political doctrines of the South Asian Islamic scholar, Salafi-oriented Sufi and theologian Ismail Delwi, who was from 1779 to 1831. Promised Messiah al-Islam was born in 1835, so this person died before them, and he influenced these people, Nanotwi and Gangoi. Gangoi is who we are dealing with right now. He is the character. So in its early years, Deobandi scholars engaged in theological debates with the Christian and Hindu scholars with the objective of defending Islamic faith into a form of popular struggle to overthrow British colonialism. Deobandi theologians of Jamiat Ulama-e-Hind in particular discussed multiculturalism and opposition to the partition of India with a strategic vision to safeguard the religious freedoms of Muslims in India. The movement has spread from India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh to the UK, and has a presence in South Africa. The Pakistani branch and the original Indian seminaries have far less contact since the partition of India for political reasons related to the India-Pakistan border. Followers of the Deobandi movement are extremely diverse. Some advocate for nonviolence, and others are militant. Dun dun dun. I mean, this face I've seen before. British colonialism in India was seen by a group of Indian scholars consisting of Rashid Ahmed Gangoi, Muhammad Yaqub Nanotwi, Shah Rafiuddin, Sayyid Muhammad Abid. Okay, these people to be corrupting Islam. So they're saying that British colonialism was corrupting Islam. The group founded an Islamic seminary known as Darul Uloom Deoband, where the Islamic revivalist and anti-imperialist ideology of the Deobandis began to develop. So it's like kind of like a reactionary. In time, the Darul Uloom Deoband became the second largest focal point of Islamic teaching and research after Al-Azhar University in Cairo. So this is actually insane. Insane in the sense that it's, Al-Azhar is always seen as like the most, like, the seat of Islamic education, and scholars are printed there. Like, that's where you go. That's like, I guess you could say, the Harvard University of Islam, like Islamic education, I would say. I don't know. I'm just guessing. But that's like the kind of the place. And then I guess this would be the Yale, or this would be the second largest focal point. So towards the time of the Indian independent, I'm just guessing, by the way, based on what I'm reading. And afterward, so in the time of the Indian independence movement, so towards the time of the Indian independence movement and afterward in post-colonial India, the Deobandis advocated a notion of composite nationalism by which Muslims and Hindus were seen as one nation who were asked to be united in the struggle against the British rule. So it's like the struggle against the British rule. They're an idea. They come. They're saying we're being corrupted. Let's take our religion back. Stuff like that. In 1919, I'm just guessing. I'm just extrapolating. And so in 1919, a large group of Deobandi scholars formed a political party. So they got political, and they formed Jamiat Ulema-e-Hind. That's their flag, I guess, their logo, and opposed the partition of India. Deobandi scholar Hussain Ahmed Madani, that's him. I've seen his picture before. Helped to spread these ideas through his text Muttahida Qawmiyat or Islam, Composite Nationalism and Islam, which was a book written in 1938 when Prophet Islam was 3 years old. So a group later dissented from this position and joined Muhammad Ali Jinnah's Muslim League, including Ashraf Ali Tanvi, Shabir Ahmed Usmani, Zafar. So some folks in this group were like, nah, we're good. We're gonna join the Muslims who are for this partition, who were part of the Muslim League, because Muhammad Ali Jinnah was part of the Muslim League. The All India Muslim League was a political party founded in 1906 in Dhaka, British India, with the goal of securing Muslim interests in India. Although initially espousing a united India with interfaith unity, the Muslim League later led the Pakistan movement, calling for a separate Muslim homeland. Okay, I don't know if they called for a separate Muslim homeland, because I know Jinnah was not for, he was for a secular state. But anyway, that's a different argument. So we see this kind of split happen, and it's along political lines. And through the organizations such as Jamiat Ulema-e-Hind and Tablighi Jamaat, which is an international Islamic religious movement, it's focused on exhorting Muslims to be more religiously observant and encourages fellow members to return to practice their religion according to the teaching of Prophet Muhammad. Okay. So through this political organization and this international Tablighi Jamaat that's focused on dawah, the Deobandi movement began to spread. And as we noted, they are in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, UK, and some in South Africa, and we have some here as well. So graduates of this school in India, which is the second largest focal point after Al-Azhar in Cairo. In India, they're from countries such as South Africa, China, and Malaysia, opened thousands of madaris throughout the world. So they've opened thousands of schools around the world. So the Deobandi movement in India is managed and spread by the Ulum Deoband and the Jamiat Ulema-e-Hind. So it's a political means to an end. And it originally started, the idea of Deoband started with resistance to the British rule. So I think that's very important to kind of understand the foundations and the roots. If you can think about extreme versions of this, I mean, having similar ingredients, because they did say it's militant. There's portions of it that's militant. You can think about ISIS was trying to get their goals achieved through force, and you can think of them as trying to usurp political power as well. So this mixing of politics with religion is kind of the underpinnings of this particular group. So in Pakistan, there's about 230 million Muslims, and 15 to 30% consider themselves Deobandi. I just happened to be in Pakistan a few months ago, earlier in the year, and my grandfather's employees are actually Deobandi, and they were actually kind of like my bodyguards as well. Wherever I went, they went. They were like my driver. So we pay them, and we pay for the education. One of them is going to college, and my grandfather's paying for them. So they were Deobandi, and they were actually very devout. So, and they were from the northern areas, from the Taliban areas. So they actually escaped from the Taliban. So I know that some of these folks are also targets of more extreme people like the Taliban. But they're very strict, very strict. very on time with their namaz, and they actually like one kid was in college, the other kid was trying to be an imam, but I don't think it worked out for him. But he's very respected everywhere I go. He was given free service when we went to get a haircut. He took me to a barber. Like everybody stopped in the streets. So they have a big presence there. I could tell, like at least where I went. And so nearly 65% of total seminaries, madrasas in Pakistan are run by Deobandis. So it's interesting that they make up 15 to 30%, but actually run most of the seminaries. So looks like they're really focused on the education. So in Pakistan are run by Deobandis, where 25% are run by Barelvis. That's another sect. Then there's Ahmadis that runs 6%, and there's 3% by various Shia organizations. So that's kind of breakdown in Pakistan. The Deobandi movement is like, you could consider it the largest movement. Was a major recipient of funding from Saudi Arabia from the early 80s up until early 2000s. So you see this funding coming from Saudis, where after this funding was diverted to the rival Ahl Hadith movement. Okay, so there's some drama here, where the smaller group, I'm saying they're smaller on the basis of how many schools they run, but are they really though? Yo, I'm gonna be here all night just Google, like looking this stuff up. But see, this is an importance. I need to understand this kind of stuff, not just for back and to understand who this opponent is and why he matters, to like why the Prophet Islam was responding to him, but also like where did their descendants end up, and where are they at right now in relation to us, and what are they up to? So anyways, the Al-Hadith started with they were older. They were started in 1703 by Imam Shah Waliullah Dehlwi. He was a Sunni scholar and a Sunni reformer who contributed to the Islamic revival in the Indian subcontinent and is therefore seen by his followers as a renewer. Is considered as the intellectual forefather of the Ahl Hadith. After his pilgrimage to Mecca, he spent 14 months in Medina studying Quran, Hadith, and works of classical Hanbali theologian Ibn Taymiyyah. Under the Hadith scholar Muhammad Tahir al-Qurani, the son of Ibrahim al-Qurani. Upon return to India, he preached Tawheed, unity of God, and a return to the Sunnah, and claimed Ijtihad, just like Ibn Taymiyyah. Ijtihad is an Islamic legal term referring to independent reasoning by an expert in Islamic law, or the thorough exertion of a jurist's mental faculty in finding a solution to a legal question. It is contrasted with taqlid. According to a classical Sunni theory, Ijtihad requires expertise in the Arabic language. So Shah maintained that Ijtihad is essential for Muslim scholars for all ages, since cognizance of divine injunctions related to the novel issues of each era is obligatory. So I think the Taqlid, so this is so these are all important because it tells you like the mindset also, and the concept and the terminologies of the current Muslim Ummah and these scholars, and like kind of where the Islamic thought is at, where it's at right now, where it was, so on and so, how it changed, evolved. So the Ijtihad is a physical effort or mental effort, is an Islamic legal term referring to an independent reasoning. So it's like someone who's an expert of Islamic law, Sharia, is going to be using their physical effort or mental effort to independently reason, to make sense of laws, contrasted with taqlid, which is imitation, conformity to legal precedent. So according to the classic Sunni theory, Ijtihad requires expertise in Arabic, theology, revealed text, principles of jurisprudence, usul al-fiqh, and is not employed where authentic and authoritative texts, Quran, or these are considered unambiguous with regard to the question, or where there is an existing scholarly consensus or ijma. Ijtihad is considered to be a religious duty for those qualified to perform it. An Islamic scholar who is qualified to perform Ijtihad is called a mujtahid. For the first 5 centuries of Islam, the practice of Ijtihad continued in theory and practice among Sunni Muslims. It then first became subject to dispute in the 12th century. By the 14th century, development of classic Islamic jurisprudence or fiqh prompted leading Sunni jurists to state that the main legal questions in Islam have been addressed and to call for the scope of ijtihad to be restricted. So it's like, hey, we have had enough time to think about this stuff and to understand how this matters, like to the practical day-to-day scope of our lives. And so the main legal questions in Islam had already been addressed, and they called for this to stop reinterpreting these laws. In the modern era, this gave rise to a perception among Orientalists, scholars, and sections of the Muslim public that the so-called gate of ijtihad was closed at the start of the classical era. While recent scholarship established that the practice of ijtihad had never ceased in Islamic history, the extent and mechanisms of legal change in the post-formative periods remain a subject of debate. Differences amongst the fuqaha, the jurists, prevented Sunni Muslims from reaching any consensus ijma on the issues of continuity of ijtihad and the existence of mujtahids. Thus, ijtihad remained a key aspect of Islamic jurisprudence throughout the centuries. Ijtihad was practiced through the early modern period. Claims for ijtihad and the superiority over taqlid were voiced unremittingly. So starting from the 18th century, Islamic reformers began calling for the abandonment of taqlid and emphasis on ijtihad, which they saw as a return to Islamic origins. Public debates in the Muslim world surrounding ijtihad continued to the present day. The advocacy of ijtihad has been particularly associated with the Salafiyya and modernist movements. Among contemporary Muslims in the West, there have emerged new versions of ijtihad, which emphasize substantive moral values over traditional judicial methodology. Shia jurists did not use the term ijtihad until the 12th century, with the exception of Zaydi jurisprudence. The early Imami Shia were unanimous in censuring ijtihad in the field of law, ahkam, which is an Islamic term with several meanings. In the Quran, the word hukam is variously used to mean arbitration, judgment, authority, or God's will. In the early Islamic period, the Kharijites gave it political connotation by declaring that they accept only the hukum of God. Okay, that's interesting, but not for right now. After the Shiite embrace of various doctrines of Mu'tazila and classical Sunni fiqh jurisprudence, this led to a change after the victory of the Usulis. Usulism is a majority school of 12 Shia Islam in opposition to the minority Akhbarism. The Usulis favor the use of ijtihad reasoning in the creation of new rules of jurisprudence, in assessing hadiths to exclude traditions they believe unreliable, and considering it obligatory to obey a mujtahid. So the Usulis, after the victory of the Usulis, who based law on principles of usul over the Akhbaris, traditionalists, who emphasized and reports of traditions, hadiths, by the 19th century, ijtihad will become a mainstream. So it became mainstream in Shia practice by the 19th century. So ijtihad is still debated today, but it's seen as a return to the roots of Islam. And, you know, if you compare this to like the practice of law in the US by the government and by the Supreme Court, like they still continue to, so I guess they do their version of ijtihad. But anyways, that's good to know. Going back to al-Hadith, so Shah Waliullah Delvi, who started al-Hadith, he was born in 1703, died in 1762. He's the intellectual forefather of al-Hadith. After he goes to Mecca, spends 14 months in Medina, studies Quran, Hadith from the works of the classical Hanbali theologian Ibn Taymiyyah under a Hadith scholar, and then when he comes back to India, he preaches Tawheed and a return to the Sunnah and claimed Ijtihad, just like Ibn Taymiyyah, who is also claiming Ijtihad. So you could see Ibn Taymiyyah, 1328, and then that's where they're saying, like, around that time, folks were saying that no more Ijtihad, it's all about taqlid. You know, we've addressed everything there is to address, but Ibn Taymiyyah was, I guess he was saying that He believed in ijtihad. And so Shah Wali al-Delvi studies from his works, comes back and says, actually, I align myself with Ibn Taymiyyah because ijtihad it should be practiced. So Shah maintained that ijtihad is essential for Muslim scholars for all ages, since cognizance of divine injunctions related to the novel issues of each era is obligatory. He also opposed various rituals of saint veneration and customs at saints' tombs, which he held to be idolatrous. So this is stuff that's going on in his time. It's important to know these concepts, or what was going on then and still goes on now. Shah's campaigns against bid'ah, religious innovations, emphasis on ijtihad, as well as political activities were immensely influenced by Ibn Taymiyyah. His precepts for reviving an Islamic caliphate modeled on the Khulafa al-Rashidin, as elucidated in his treatises like Izalat al-Khifa, Qurat al-Ainain, etc., echo the doctrines propounded by Ibn Taymiyyah during the 14th, 7th century, the 7th century. So after the death of his father, Shah Abdulaziz continued the works of Shah Waliullah. He was a muhaddis who emphasized, muhaddis is like the person who is a hadith scholar. You can see hadith, like hadith, who emphasized the importance of hadith with students all across the subcontinent. As a teacher, preacher, and social religious reformer, Shah Abdulaziz was closely monitoring the social political developments in the subcontinent. British were gaining ascendancy in India by capturing power in Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa. In 1799, British defeated the kingdom of Mysore in the Fourth Anglo-Mysore War, when the British armies, so this was fought in the south of India. So when the British armies entered Delhi in 1803, the Mughal Empire was turned into a protectorate of British East India Company, thus gaining political supremacy in the subcontinent. Upon this, Shah Abdulaziz declared a decisive fatwa, declaring India to be Dar al-Harb, abode of war. So he declared war. This was the first significant fatwa against colonial rule in the subcontinent that gave an indirect call to South Asian Muslims to fight colonial occupation and liberate the country. This decisive fatwa by Shah Waliullah's eldest son and successor, Shah Abdulaziz, calling upon, interesting, we have two different versions, spellings of his name in the same article, calling upon Muslims to strive to restore India back to Islamic rule, would greatly inspire his student Sayyid Ahmad Shahid and motivate him to plan for future jihad. After a brief period as a mercenary, Sayyid Ahmad would pursue his religious studies and reappeared as an eminent religious scholar and a visionary leader, gaining many disciples. He came to be widely identified as an inheritor of Shah Waliullah's mantle, and numerous Sunni Muslims volunteered to join his cause. Indian jihad movement. Under these circumstances, the call to jihad against British rule began becoming popular against the Muslim masses. Shah Ismail Delvi, the nephew of Shah Abdulaziz and grandson of Shah Waliullah, would lead a religious revivalist movement. In addition to being an excellent orator, he was also a soldier and military commander. Shah Muhammad Shah, the grandson of Shah Abdulaziz, would continue his religious reform after Abdulaziz's death in 1823. So Abdulaziz passed away in 1823 before the Prophet ﷺ was born. Maulana Abdul Hayy, son-in-law Shah Abdulaziz, was also a reputed scholar. These three theologians prepared the spade work of Tariq-e-Ahmadiyya, the reform movement that would be known as the Indian Wahhabi movement. During his last year, Shah Abdulaziz would give his cloak to Sayyid Ahmad Bareilly. Appointing him as a successor, Sayyid Ahmad would campaign against the corruption of various Sufi orders and initiate his disciples into Tariqa-e-Muhammadiyya order. The disciples in this order were required to make a vow that they will strictly abide by Sharia and would not follow anything not proven by Quran or Hadith. So one of the prominent disciples of Sayyid Ahmad, this is fascinating. One of the prominent disciples of Sayyid Ahmad was Wilayat Ali Khan, a student of Haji Abdul Haq of Benares, popularly known as Najdi Sheikh. Abdul Haq was an Islamic scholar who spent years studying in the remote Central Arabian province of Najd, the seat of the Wahhabi movement. Upon his return, he preached many of its militant ideals and had already established Wahhabi doctrines in South Asia before Sayyid Ahmad's Hajj in 1821. Abdul Haq would later become a member of Tariqa-e-Muhammadiyya and join Sayyid Ahmad's Hajj to Hijaz in 1821 along with his disciple Wilayat Ali. Unlike other members Abdullah traveled to Yemen to study under theologian Muhammad bin Ali al-Shawkani and would become greatly influential in shaping the teachings of Al-Hadith. Finally, we get to this connection. Meanwhile, Wilayat Ali Khan, being a disciple of both Sayyid Ahmad and Najdi Sheikh, emerged as an important leader of the Indian Wahhabi movement and its military campaigns of jihad. Okay, in 1821, Sayyid Ahmad embarked on a journey for Hajj in Hijaz, accompanied by Shah Ismail Delvi and Maulana Abdul Hadi with 400 disciples. They performed Hajj and stayed in Hijaz for 8 months. Shah Ismail and Abdul Hadi authored the book Sirat-e-Mustaqim to call Arabs to their reformative movement. They returned home in 1824. The three scholars then charted a strategic plan to wage jihad against the colonial occupation across India. Many parts of the subcontinent became recruitment centers for the Mujahideen when his Pathan disciples offered him territory. Sayyid Ahmad set up the Northwest Frontier Province as the operations headquarters for the future Wahhabite Jihad in 1826 to retake the subcontinent from the British. However, this put the Mujahideen into conflict with the Sikh Empire in January 1827. Sayyid Ahmad was elected as Imam and Amir al-Mu'mineen by religious scholars and tribal chiefs. Soon, war broke out between Sikhs and Wahhabi Mujahideen. So on February 1828, one of the three leaders of jihad, Maulvi Abdullahi, the chief advisor of Sayyid Ahmad, died as an old and ailing person. In his letters to the Sikh ruler Ranjit Singh, Sayyid Ahmad clarified that he did not seek a confrontation with Sikhs, but only their help in defeating the British. Ranjit Singh, for his part, respected Sayyid Ahmad as a courageous, bold, and determined person. By 1830, many Pathan tribal leaders, tribal chiefs, rose against the Wahhabi Mujahideen and committed massacres against the Wahhabi immigrants. Disillusioned by this, Sayyid Ahmad lost interest in the movement and made plans to migrate to Arabia. However, senior advisors such as Shah Ismail posed the idea and sought to complete the objectives of the movement despite the setbacks. So, a lot of stuff is going on. Sayyid Ahmad set out his last journey for Balakot with the aim to capture Kashmir, accompanied by Shah Ismail, a Pashtun chieftain named Zabardast Khan, who made a secret deal with the Sikh commander Sher Singh, withheld promised reinforcements. On 6th May 1831, an army of 10,000 Mujahideen faced a strong force of 12,000 Sikh soldiers led by Sher Singh. On that day, Sayyid Ahmad, Shah Ismail, and prominent leader of the Wahhabi movement fell fighting in the battlefield. Sikh victory at Balakot arose jubilation in Lahore. The defeat at Balakot made a devastating blow to the Wahhabi movement. After the death and defeats of both Sayyid Ahmad and Shah Ismail Delvi, many of his followers continued the jihad movement across South Asia. Others became the followers of Shah Muhammad Ishaq, who died in 1846, the grandson of Shah Abdul Aziz and the head of Madrasa Ramia in Delhi. Some of the disciples of Shah Muhammad Ishaq would formally establish the Al-Hadith movement. So, okay, now we get to this. There's so much backstory. War, fighting, death, like jihad, blah, blah, blah. And then it's like, all right. In the mid-19th century, an Islamic religious reform movement was started in northern India that continued the Tariq-e-Ahmadiyya movement. It rejected everything introduced in Islam after Quran Sunnah. These at the early eras. This was led by Nawab Siddiq Hasan Khan of Bhopal, whose father became a Sunni convert under the influence of Shah Abdul Aziz and Sayyid Nazir Hussain, who was a student of Shah Muhammad Ishaq and the grandson of Shah Abdul Aziz and Khalifa's successor. With the aim of restoring Islamic unity and strengthening Muslim faith, they called for a return to original sources of religion, Quran, Hadith, and eradicate what they perceived as bid'ah, innovation, shirk, polytheism, heresies, and superstitions. Nawab Siddiq Hasan Khan, one of the founders of Al-Hadith movement, was influenced by Yemeni scholar al-Shakwani. So, Siddiq Hasan's father, Sayyid Aulad Hassan, was a strong supporter of Sayyid Ahmad Shahid and had accompanied him to Afghanistan, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, to participate in his famous jihad movement. Another major source of influence on Khan was the Najdi Sheikh, Banarasi, who had returned from Yemen and became the first scholar to teach the doctrines of Yemeni theologian al-Shakwani in South Asia. So we have some Yemeni influence in South Asia, teaching him the doctrines such as rejection of shirk. And okay, so we see this like infusion of Wahhabism from the Najd, Yemen, and these areas, and a rejection of shirk, bid'ah, taqleed, and kind of like a return to original Islam the original origins of Islam. No, this is a big article. Following the teaching of Shah Ismail, Ahmadis also rejected taqlid to works of classical Sunni fiqh and believed in direct understanding of Quran and Hadith. Due to their connection with the Shah Ismail and say them as jihad movement, Ahmadis were considered as Wahhabi conspirators by the British administration. The anti-colonial activism of Ahmadis, religious reformers, as well as their sympathies for jihad, made them the primary target more than any other reform movement. For the British imperial statesmen, their endeavors were part of a wider Wahhabi conspiracy. Apart from the British, many Hanafite scholars are also critical of say them and their followers. Throughout the 19th century, Ahmadi scholars were persecuted under various texts during the Wahhabi trials of 1850s to 1870s. Eventually, the leaders of the movement sought pragmatic accommodation with the British Raj in order to stop the repression campaign against Wahhabis. Upon the petition of Ahmadi scholar Muhammad Hussain Batalvi to the British Indian administration, the government of India issued a notification in 1886 stop using the term Wahhabi in official correspondence. In a victory to reform movement, the government conceded to refer in the community as Ahmadis. All right, so they're like, yo, they got painted as Wahhabis, and Batalvi, who we know was one of the enemies of the Prophet ﷺ, stepped in and was like, yo, stop calling us Wahhabis, man. And then they like, all right, we'll call you Ahmadis. Because it reminds me of like when companies are like Facebook. Facebook was beaten up by society, by the media, for just being this this company that was founded in part by this guy who only cared about himself, screwed over his friends, and then collected a lot of data and is kind of affecting or brainwashing little kids or affecting them in a negative way, and just being a nuisance. And then they rebranded to Meta and to try to get away. So companies will try to change their names to get away from that. Imagine like a human being trying to do that. Like it's that humans can't do that, but companies can do that. So this is kind of similar where humans were being branded and being persecuted for this Wahhabism label, which they got from this from the Gulf area and influence, and then they try to do jihad and they try to like have like a militant like resistance, and then they were like, enough is enough, yo, stop persecuting us, let us be, don't even call us Wahhabi anymore. And they're like, all right, we'll call you Ahmadis. So the University of Paris political scientist Antoine Safir has referred to the movement as having an elitist character, which perhaps contributes to their status as a minority in South Asia. Folk Islam and Sufism, commonly popular with the poor and working class in the region, are anathema to Ahmadis' beliefs and practices. This attitude towards Sufism has brought the movement into conflict with the rival Barelvi movement, even more so than the Barelvi's perennial rivals, the Deobandis. So in the 1920s, Ahmadis opened a center for their movement in Srinagar and Kashmir. Followers of the Hanafi school of law, forming the majority of Muslims in Jammu and Kashmir, socially boycotted and physically attacked Ahmadis followers, eventually declaring such followers to be apostates and banning them from praying in the mainstream mosques. So, I mean, look at this. In the 1920s, they're like banning each other from praying in their mosques. And then they talk about, turn around and talk about like having Ummah unity and stuff against us, which they're only united in our opposition, but they're totally divided from inside. It's like when people say the United States of America, but like you have people hating on California, people hating on Texas just because of political leanings, and it doesn't seem like as united as the name portrays. And actually, I got that point from a comedian who I saw a YouTube short earlier today, and his comedian, the popular comedian from Boston. Anyways, it rings true. So from 1930s, the group also began to be active in the political realm of Pakistan, with Ehsan Elahi Zahir leading the movement into a full foray in the 1970s. eventually gaining the movement a network of mosques and Islamic schools following others. So what was it, like 6% or 3%? 6%, 3%, 6%. We'll look at it. Following other South Asian Islamic movements, the Ahmadis now also administer schools and mosques in the English-speaking world. In the modern era, the movement draws both inspiration, financial support from Saudi Arabia. Of course, the Wahhabi connection is there, and the funding. It makes sense now why they are being funded. Now being favored over the rival Deobandi movement as a counterbalance to Iranian influence. Interesting. So these guys are against the Sufis, or yeah, so they're against the Sufis are against them, and you can kind of see like the Iranian influences. They're also against that. So these guys are like. So, okay, the tenets. So they, of course, we started with Taqlid. They oppose Taqlid. They reject being bound by the four mainstream Islamic jurisprudence, Madhab, and the four Imams. Hence, they are known as Ghair Muqallidin, non-conformists. They repudiate the traditions of the school of jurisprudence and consider it permissible to seek guidance directly from Quran and authentic Hadith. So they're seen also as elitists. They're like, nah, we're good. We're gonna do our own thing and interpret this Quran and Hadith, because that's what Islam like started from. This set them in opposition to the Sufi sects of the subcontinent, with whom they have often arguments, and they disagree with the followers of the Hanafi school of thought due to jurisprudential differences. Classical treatises of Hanbali theologian Ahmad ibn Taymiyyah constitute one of the most important doctrinal references of the Al-Hadith. These works were introduced to them under the influence of prominent Yemeni traditional scholars Muhammad al-Shawkani. Al-Hadith movements continues the Reformed tradition Shah Waliullah Delvi, whom the adherents regard as its first modern member. They also draw upon the teachings of his son, Shah Abdulaziz Muhaddis Delvi, his follower, Sayyid Ahmad Barelvi, and the Yemenite Qadi Muhammad al-Shawkani, whom they regard as Sheikh al-Islam. They call him Sheikh al-Islam, which was used in the classical era as an honorific title for outstanding scholars of the Islamic sciences. It first emerged in Khorasan towards the end of the 4th Islamic century in the central and western lands of Islam. It was an informal title given to jurists whose fatwas were particularly influential. So it's very revered, this Yemenite scholar. They refer to him as Sheikh al-Islam. Sadiq Hassan Khan's father studied under Shah Abdulaziz, and Sayyid Nazir Hussain was a student of the Muhammad Shah, a grandson of Shah Waliullah Delhi. Due to their reliance on the Quran Hadith only and their rejection of Qiyas, analogical reasoning, so analogical reasoning, Qiyas, is a process of deductive analogy in which the teachings of the Hadith are compared and contrasted with those of the Quran and Islamic jurisprudence in order to apply a known injunction to a new circumstance and create a new injunction. Here, the ruling of the Sunnah and the Quran. Okay. So they reject Qiyas. Actually, why would they reject Qiyas? So the ruling of Sunnah and the Quran are used to solve or provide in response to a new problem that may arise. This, however, is only the case providing that the set precedence or paradigm in the new problem that has come about will share operative illah. The illah is a specific set of circumstances that trigger a certain law into action. An example of the use of Qiyas is the case of the ban on selling or buying of goods after the last call for Friday prayers until the end of the prayer stated in the Quran. By analogy, this prohibition is extended to other transactions and activities such as agricultural work and administration. Among Sunni Muslim, Qiyas has been accepted as a secondary source of Sharia law along with Ijma after the primary sources of Quran and Sunnah. Okay, so contrasted with those of the Quran. So late and modern Sunni jurisprudence regards analogical reason as a secondary source of Islamic law, along with a binding consensus following the Quran and the prophetic tradition, while Muslim scholarship in the later period traditionally claimed that analogy had existed in Islamic jurisprudence since their religion's inception. Modern scholarship generally points to Muslim scholar Abu Hanifa as the first to incorporate analogical reason as a secondary source of law. Since its inception, analogical reason has been the subject of extensive study in regard to both its proper place in Islamic law and its proper application. Validity as source of law. Among Sunni traditions, there's still a range of attitudes regarding the validity of analogy as a method of jurisprudence. Imam Bukhari, Ahmad ibn Hanbal, and Dawood al-Zahiri, for example, rejected the use of analogical reason outright, arguing that to rely on personal opinion in lawmaking would mean that each individual would ultimately form their own subjective conclusions. Bernard Weiss, one of today's foremost experts on Islamic law and philosophy, explains that analogical reason was accepted as a fourth source of law by later generations. Its validity was not a foregone conclusion among earlier Muslim jurists. Thus, while its status as a fourth source of law was accepted by the majority later and modern Muslim jurists, this was not the case at the inception of Muslim jurisprudence as a field. Opposition to Qiyas came from a number of angles. Professor Walid Ibrahim al-Ujaji of Imam Muhammad ibn Saud Islamic University explains that opposition to Qiyas is coming from multiple angles. Some of them argued that Qiyas is contrary to reasoning. One argument given in this slide was that delving into this method is intellectually repugnant in its own right. Another argument was Islamic legal rulings are based on human well-being, and no one knows human well-being except the one, Allah, who gave us the sacred law. Therefore, the only way we can know the sacred law is from the revelation. Other scholars said that Qiyas is not contrary to reason, but prohibited by the sacred law itself. Scott Lucas, when mentioning Ahmad Dalal's position on Salafism, states that Dalal declared that Salafism is better understood as a method of thinking of or an approach to authoritative sources than as a distinct school of thought. That includes the elevation of the Quran and sound hadith at the expense of the opinions attributed to eponyms of the four Sunni schools and the rejection of or a severe curtailment of Qiyas. Imam Bukhari maintained a negative position towards Qiyas as he held views aligned with the Zahiris of his time. Scott Lucas states that Bukhari's rejection of Qiyas was placed within the context of what Bukhari perceived as invalid techniques of ijtihad, which included religious innovation, bid'ah, rai, and tamthil. Context of what Bukhari perceived as invalid techniques of. So Imam Bukhari said that Qiyas is an invalid technique of ijtihad. This is why I was confused. I was like trying to read this. I thought ijtihad is like looking at the Quran hadith and making a determination. And then I thought Qiyas is the same thing. But it seems like Qiyas is a technique of that, but it's an invalid technique. So Lucas also points out common mistakes other scholars make when analyzing Bukhari's position on Qiyas. The biggest source of confusion for scholars is the fact that while rejecting Qiyas, Bukhari accepts the idea of tashbih, comparison, which seems similar to analogy. However, this is not the case, as this tashbih is a comparison used in explanation, such as a metaphor, whereas Qiyas applies a specific legal ruling to another case. Bukhari is also known for his criticism of those who say that the Prophet used Qiyas, and he devoted a section of his Sahih to the topic. Bukhari states, if the Prophet was asked about something about which he had not received a revelation, he either said, I do not know, or did not reply until he received the revelation. He did not reply by means of Rai or Qiyas due to the Quranic verse, in accordance to what God has shown you. Interesting. Ahmad ibn Hanbal, on Ahmad's views, Christopher Melche states, Ahmad and his fellow traditionalists of the 9th century expressly condemned the Hanafi exercise of Qiyas. So remember, Hanafi is what the the Ubundis follow. So they exercise qiyas, and so Aladis reject it. So we see like kind of like the contrast between the two. So when compared with Dawood al-Zahiri's intensely negative stance towards qiyas, Mashayikh also states Ahmad ibn Hanbal could likewise be quoted as we have seen in total rejection of Rai, which means opinion, and qiyas, which means analogy. Ahmad ibn Hanbal has been quoted as saying there is no qiyas in the Sunnah and examples are not to be made up for it. Support for its validity. Early support for the validity of analogical reason in jurisprudence came from Abu Hanifa and his student Abu Yusuf. Al-Shafi'i was a proponent of analogical reasoning as well. So the Shafis and Hanafis are for qiyas, but the Hanbalis and those who follow Imam Bukhari reject it. But some scholars saying that they reject it. They don't. Anyways, I'm getting too technical here, and it's half past midnight, so probably we'll wrap it up in half an hour. I gotta sleep, man. I have the day off tomorrow, so that's why I was like, let me do a quick stream. It took me some time to like set up too. I've dialed in a little bit. I've changed like some of the camera settings. It's not perfect. Still can't figure out how to get both cameras to kind of play nice with each other, but yeah, I'll have to figure that out later. So, all right, where were we? So, early support for the validity of this came from Abu Hanifa, and Al-Shafi was proponent of this as well, though his usage was less frequent than that of Abu Hanifa. So Al-Shafi to some certain extent, but Abu Hanifa really was the one who used it more. Acceptance of analogical reasoning gradually increased within the Muslim world, with the Malikite and Hanbalite schools eventually granting full acceptance as the Hanafites and Shafi'ites already had done. Okay, so the Hanbalites actually do acceptance of gradually accepted it. Okay, so the overwhelming majority of Sunni jurists from the late period onward affirmed its validity. Japanese scholars of Islam Kojiro Nakamura defined the orthodox Sunni schools in regard to their eventual acceptance of analogy in descending order of that acceptance. Hanafis were first, then Malikis, then Shafis, then Hanbalis, and Zahiris. Much work was performed on the details of proper analogy with major figures such as Al-Kastalani, Al-Bakilani, Al-Jawaini, and Al-Ahmadi from the Shafi'ite school, and Ibn Abdin from the Hanafite school, proving rules and guidelines still used to this day. Application as a source of law. Sunni scholar Baghawi gave a commonly accepted definition of an analogy in Islamic law. Analogical reasoning is the knowledge by which one learns the method of deriving a ruling from the Quran and prophetic tradition. In this case, the above mentioned ruling should not already be apparent in the Quran, prophetic tradition, or consensus. If there is no derivation involved due to the explicitness of the ruling in the Quran and the prophetic tradition, then such a person is not by definition mujtahid. In order for qiyas to be used in Islamic law, three things are necessary. First, there must be a new case for which the Quran and Sunnah of the Prophet do not provide a clear ruling. Second, there must be an original case which is resolved using a hukm or ruling from the Quran, Sunnah, or process of ijma. Third, there must be a common illah or reasoning which applies to both cases in an analogous way. These three conditions allow for a hukm to be made on the new case based on a logical connection to the reasoning from the original case. And then Shias have their own interpretation. Historical debate. Before the Middle Ages, there was a logical debate among Islamic theologians or whether the term qiyas refers to analogical reasoning. They even debated about the actual term. So some Islamic scholars argue that qiyas refers to inductive reasoning, which Ibn Hazm disagree with, arguing that qiyas does not refer to inductive reasoning, but refers to categorical syllogism in a real sense and analogical reasoning in a metaphorical sense. On the other hand, Al-Ghazali and Ibn Qudama al-Maqdisi argued that qiyas refers to analogical reasoning in a real sense and categorical syllogism in a metaphorical sense. Other Islamic scholars at the time, however, argued that the term qiyas refers to both analogical reasoning and okay. I gotta do one last thing. Analogical reasoning. Analogical reasoning. Categorical reasoning. Syllogism. Someone explain this stuff to me like I'm 5 years old. Analogical reasoning, categorical reasoning, are all types of logical reasoning, but they differ in their approach. Analogical reasoning draws conclusions based on similarities between different situations. Categorical reasoning deals with classifying objects into categories and making inferences based on those classifications. Syllogisms are a specific form of deductive argument that uses premise to arrive at a conclusion. So analogical reasoning, that's the definition. Example, if you know a friend enjoyed a particular movie, you might recommend another movie to them based on similarities in genres, actors, or plot. Yeah, so I like war movies. So I recently watched one. It's been a few months, I think over the winter break. World War movies. So Saving Private Ryan is a classic. I watched some recently, 1970. Oh yeah, I watched two. All Quiet on the Western Front. Yep, this is one of them. And then I just watched this like a few months ago. The other one was 1917. Guess which one I like more. They were both interesting, but I liked All Quiet on the Western Front. In fact, when it was finished, I was like, no, I want more. So, just crazy movie, man. Just insane. Insane. Actually, I would watch it again. So, it's interesting. Actually, if you like one, like they're kind of different. So, I don't know if you would, you can even recommend if this example even works anymore. But that's interesting. So, I like that. Okay, so if a friend likes a particular movie, you might, so someone likes World War movies, you might recommend them another movie then based on similarities in genres, actors, or plot. Key features. It relies on the idea that if two things are alike in some ways, they're likely alike in other ways. Categorical reasoning. Definition. Categorical reasoning involves classifying objects into categories and making inferences based on those categories. Example, knowing that all cats are mammals and that Mittens is a cat, you can conclude that Mittens is also a mammal. Key feature, it focuses on relationships between categories and their members. Syllogism is a type of deductive argument that consists of two premises and a conclusion. So premise one, all men are mortal. Premise two, Socrates is a man. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. In summary, okay, so what is this picture? Excuse me. 4 types of syllogism. Okay. Categorical syllogism makes claim about groups of things. So no vegetarians are pork chop lovers. Some meat eaters are not pork chop lovers. Some mosquitoes are disease carriers. All mice are rodent. These are examples of categorical statements. Syllogism, okay. Hypothetical. Inductive reasoning is characterized by the lack of absolute certainty that can be guaranteed by the conclusion. Several of the types of inductive reasoning are described here. Statistical. So premise one, of the Easter eggs hidden in the front yard, 95% are chocolate. This egg was found in the front yard, so this egg is probably chocolate. There's no certainty that the egg just found is a chocolate one, but it's highly likely. Analogical reasoning is a type of, they're saying it is a type of inductive reasoning. An analogy involves highlighting perceived similarities between two things as grounds for transferring further attributes or means. So bandicoots and opossums are marsupials with extra upper teeth. Opossums are omnivorous and eat small animals and plant matter. Therefore, bandicoots probably eat small animals and plant matter. Analogical reasoning is used extensively in making arguments in philosophy. We will see such arguments later. Okay, so They are saying it is actually inductive reasoning. Who said it's not? Ibn Hazm said they're not. Anyways, Qiyas. Going back to the Al-Hadith, they reject Qiyas. Where was I? So they identify themselves with the old Zahiri school of fiqh. Shah Ismail Deli's book, Taqwiyat al-Iman, is viewed as a manifesto of the Al-Hadith movement. In it, he emphasized on the pristine monotheism of Islam and condemned what he viewed as heretic un-Islamic. Such customs included celebration of the anniversary of awliya, asking their mercy, invoking Allah's blessings through them. Al-Hadith condemned practices such as visiting the Prophet's graves and various customs related to saint veneration fervently. Okay. In a tone which rivaled in intensity that of the Arabian Muwahhideen movement. Man, there's so many movements. The Wahhabism is an exonym for a Salafi revivalist movement within Sunni Islam named after the 18th century Hanbali scholar Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. Was initially established in the central Arabian region of Najd, and later spreads to other parts of the Arabian Peninsula. Okay, so according to Islamic scholar Muhammad Asadullah al-Ghalib, that's what he looks like, Bangladeshi. The aim and the objective of Al-Hadith movement is to earn the satisfaction of Allah by preaching and establishing unmixed Tawheed and the following properly the Kitab and Sunnah in all spheres of life. The social and political aim of Al-Hadith movement is to make all-out reforms of the society through the reforms of Aqidah and Amal. Amal is like your work practices. Like other Islamic reform movement, the Al-Hadiths are distinguished by certain common features and belief. The men tend to have a particular side of untrimmed beard, often considered a visual indicator. In regard to ritual acts of ibadah, Islamic the movement's practices are noticeably different from Hanafi madhab, which predominates in South Asia. The men hold their hands above the navel when lined up for congregational prayers, raise them to the level of their heads before bowing, and say Ameen out loud. Interesting. Al-Hadith call for a return to the first principles and for a revival of the original simplicity and purity of faith. You can see this person's beard is like big. So, okay, so that's what they do. It's called peacocking. Okay. Probably is. They're also opposed to foreign customs and beliefs that crept into Muslim societies, as well as foreign philosophical thoughts and Sufi mystical concepts such as marifat. In Sufism, Marifa is a mystical understanding of God or divine reality. It has been described as an immediate recognition and understanding of the true nature of things as they are. Marifa encompasses a deep understanding of the ultimate truth, which is essentially God. Okay. The movement also distinguishes itself from the Wahhabi movement, which followed the Hanbali legal school, while the Al-Hadith adherents consider themselves as following no single madhab. Breaking with the dominant Hanafi and Sunni Sufi customs, they also emphasize their fraternity and equality of all Muslims, such as permitting Muslim women to pray in masjids, addressing the khutbah to both villagers and city dwellers in the native languages, making divorce procedure easy and accessible to women, rejecting triple talaq. Triple talaq are now banned means of Islamic divorce, previously available to Muslims in India, especially adherents of Hanafi school of thought. A Muslim man could legally divorce his wife by proclaiming 3 times. Whatever, sounds wild. Authorizing marriage contracts between poor and affluent. Other key themes, including living a pious and disciplined life, attainment of ihsan, spiritual perfection through virtuous deeds. While the movement became popular amongst the affluent urban classes, it also has considerable sway in the rural regions. According to Professor Abdul Ali, former chairman and director of the Department of Islamic Studies, Aligarh Muslim University, in Uttar Pradesh, the Al-Hadith movement was inspired by the school of thought of Shah Waliullah of Delhi, who in the 18th century imparted renewed emphasis on the study of Hadith and raised his voice against the principle of taqlid in matters by justifying the principles of ijtihad. which gave Hadith the right of supremacy over the rulings of the juristic schools. This particular trend in Shah Waliullah's thought became the starting point of Al-Hadith movement. The Al-Hadith movement, which was started in India in the 19th century, was quite different from that of Wahhabism because it drew its inspiration not from Muhammad ibn al-Wahhab of Najd, but from his Indian contemporary Shah Waliullah Delhi. At the same time, both these movements had some elements of religious purification for the rejection of taqlid. Relations with other reform movements, with Wahhabi, which was a revivalist movement that emerged in the Arabian Peninsula in the 18th century, share reformist traditional heritage of Al-Hadith. In the late 19th century, Wahhabi scholars would establish contact with Al-Hadith, and many Wahhabi students would travel to South Asia to study under the Al-Hadith ulama, and later became prominent scholars in the Arabian Wahhabi movement establishment. So both the Wahhabis and Al-Hadith share a common creed, opposed Sufi practices such as visiting shrines, seeking aid, istighatha from dead awliya. Both the movements survived the teaching of medieval Sunni theologian and jurist Ibn Taymiyyah, whom they considered as Shaykh al-Islam. The resources of Muslim principle, okay. Organizations. Leading proponents of the movement joined forces against opposition they faced. Established ulama, and in 1906 formed the All India Al-Hadith Conference. The Jamiat Al-Hadith was represented the All India Azad Muslim Conference, which opposed the partition of India. One member organization of all is the Anjuman-e-Hadith, formed by students of Sayyid. Okay. After 1947 separation of India and Pakistan, the Pakistani Al-Hadith Center was based in and around Karachi. So they opposed the partition and, of course, are active after the partition, and they lost contact with each other. And Al-Hadith was small. In 1930, Al-Hadith was founded as a small political party in India. In Pakistan, the movement formed a political party, Jamiat Al-Hadith, which, unlike similar Islamic groups, opposed government involvement in affairs of Sharia law. Their leader, Ehsan Elahi Zahir, was assassinated in 1987. Yo. This guy was assassinated. Interesting. He died from an assassin's bomb blast in 1980. He was taken to Riyadh in an injured condition. So on March 23rd, 1987, while giving a speech in Lahore, a bomb which had been planted in the flowers in the state exploded, severely injuring him. Upon the request of the Saudi Grand Mufti Ibn Baz, Zahir was transferred to Saudi Arabia for treatment at the National Guard Hospital. However, medics could not save him from his severe wounds. His funeral prayer was attended by thousands, including the President of Pakistan, Zia-ul-Haq, ISI Chief Akhtar Abdul Rahman, and the Pakistani Foreign Minister Sahibzada Yaqub Khan. Zahir was then buried in the historic Al-Baqi Cemetery in Medina. The oldest and first Islamic cemetery in Medina, located, served as a burial place for many of his relatives. So, is reportedly founded by Prophet Muhammad and served as, wow. So this guy was buried in this. Wow, he's buried here. Probably don't know where he's buried because it all looks like this though. Wild. Assassinated and then buried in the graveyard the Prophet Muhammad established. That is the current Al-Hadith movement for you. Looky, Al-Qadianiyat, Arabic book he wrote. We'll come back to this guy. Barelvi, known as Ahl-Sunnah wal Jama'ah. The people of the Prophet's way in the community is a Sunni revivalist movement that generally adheres to the Hanafi and Shafi'i schools of jurisprudence. This is who the Al-Hadith reject. The Maturidi and Ash'ari creeds, a variety of Sufi orders, including the Qadri, Chishti, Naqshbandi, and Sohrawardi orders, as well as many other orders of Sufism, has hundreds of millions of followers around the world. They consider themselves to be the continuation of Sunni Islamic orthodoxy before the rise of Salafism and the Deobandi movement. The Barelvi movement is spread across the globe with millions of followers, thousands of mosques, institutions, and organizations in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Afghanistan, Sri Lanka, the United Kingdom, South Africa, and other parts of Africa, Europe, the Caribbean, and the United States. As of 2000, the movement had around 200 million followers globally, but mainly located in Pakistan and India. The movement claims to revive the Sunnah as embodied in the Quran, literature of traditions, hadith, and the way of scholars, as the people had lapsed from prophetic traditions. Consequently, scholars took the duty of reminding Muslims to go back to the ideal way of Islam. The movement drew inspiration from the Sunni doctrines of Shah Abdur Rahim, 1644 to 1719, founder of Madrasa-e-Rahmiya and one of the compiler of Fatawa-e-Alamgiri. Shah Abdur Rahim is the father of Shah Waliullah Delvi. So Shah Waliullah Delvi inspires his intellectual forefather Al-Hadith, but his father and Shah Abdul Aziz Mahmud. And so his father, so Shah Abdul Rahim, the father of him, of Shah Waliullah Delvi, is the inspiration for this group, amongst others. Wow. Fazle Haq Khairbadi, Islamic scholar and leader of 1857 rebellion, which was a major uprising in India against the rule of the British India. Okay. Issued fatwas against Wahhabi Ismail Delvi for his doctrine of God's alleged ability to lie. Imkani Kizib, Delhi in 1825. Ismail is considered as an intellectual ancestor of Deobandis. Yo, this is such a wild web. So, Ismail Delvi, the Wahhabi, and Al-Hadith are kind of like the Wahhabis. And Ismail is considered as the intellectual ancestor of the Deobandis. Wait, no, sorry, I'm confusing. Wasn't Deobandi Shah? Like, who was the one who? Man, I'm so tired. It's like almost 1 a.m. I'm almost like a chat GPT when you're having still a long conversation, and it starts forgetting the earlier stuff. I gotta wrap this up, man. I haven't even gotten into the book. I'm just like studying this stuff. I love history, by the way, which is why I'm also doing this. But I've always kind of wanted to learn all this stuff. So let me back up. Salafi reform movement that emerged in North India in the mid-19th century from the teachings of these three people. It is an offshoot of the 19th century movement that's tied, and it's tied to the 18th century traditions of the Shah Delvi and Wahhabi movement. So they do describe themselves as this as well. This is so crazy. So these guys call themselves that. They call themselves that, but then they oppose each other. But then they also draw inspiration from each other's forefathers. It's such a like a tangled web they weave. So Shah Waliullah Delvi, the intellectual forefathers of Al-Hadith, and related to the Wahhabi movement, They're like the counterparts of the like. So this group is like the counterparts of Wahhabism in the subcontinent, and they're also now funded. Okay, so now I get it. So before the Barelvi movement, or was it Deobandi? No, it's Deobandi that was funded by the Saudis. Anyways, so these guys are Wahhabis, and this Wahhabi says that God can lie, which is wild to me. But he's the intellectual ancestor of Deobandis. All right, so that's Deobandi. So that's so. But I thought Wahhabi is like Al-Hadith. So how is Deobandi? All right, let's see. I guess we didn't get to this part. So in 1970, okay, Deobandis opened the first British-based Muslim religious seminaries, educating imams and religious scholars. Deobandis have been quietly meeting the religious spiritual needs of a significant portion of British Muslims and are perhaps the most influential British Muslim group. In 2007, the Deobandis ran 17 seminaries out of a total of 26 in the UK, and were producing 80% of the home-trained Muslim clerics. So Deobandis are really like the ones that are putting up numbers in terms of seminaries. They also ran 600 of Britain's nearly 1,500 mosques. In 2014, it was reported. So 65% in Pakistan, and like 45% of the mosques in Britain, nearly all UK-based training of Islamic scholars were controlled. So they control the education. Found that a leading Deobandi preacher loathed Western values, called on Muslims to shed blood for Allah and preach contempt for Jews, Christians. Okay, so I mean that's wild. In 2015, I highlighted the Deobandi Seminary in Holcombe as a good example of school promoting British values, preventing radicalization, and protecting children. Norfolk disagreed with the assessment. All right, whatever. The Deobandi movement sees itself as scholastic. Traditions of the pre-colonial Indian subcontinent of Afghanistan, and considered its visionary forefather to be Ismail Delvi, who died 1831. Delvi was a contemporary of Muhammad ibn al. Okay, so, all right, so they're both kind of Wahhabi-esque. So it's not a creed, Aqidah, nor a denomination, Taifa, term by which its antagonists try to incite the masses against it, but it's a comprehensive picture and a complete edition of the attack of in which all the offshoots of the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'at are seen joined with their. All right, okay, that's fake news, bro. Come on, we're just reading in here that the Barelvis calling these guys like the intellectual father, calling him out for claiming this lie. So how are you going to hear say that? No, this is okay. So whatever. I said we should take this by a grain of salt. Deobandis follow the Maturidi school of Sunni Islamic scholar. Their schools teach a short text on beliefs known as Al-Aqaid Al-Nasafiyya by Hanafi Maturidi. So like they're following these guys, and Al-Hadith reject all these guys. So like Al-Hadith reject them. Barelvi calling out their for like their intellectual father. So they're not all like this is fake news. Like how is this a complete, which like all the offshoots of, because they call themselves Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah as well. The is it Barelvis? Yeah, Barelvis. So Deobandis, Barelvis, they both consider themselves the people of the Prophet's way in the community. Come on, guys. Cap. Fake. Deobandis are strong proponents of the Taqlid. In other words, they believe that Deobandi must adhere to one of the four. Okay. Claim themselves to be followers of Hanafi school. Yeah, we read this. Sufism. So the Deobandis are opposed to celebrating the so our ways of following the greatest Imam Abu Hanifa. However, the Bundis are strictly opposed to celebrating the birthday of the Islamic Prophet, the celebration of Urs, and mourning of Ashura. The Bundis also reject the building of structures over graves, visitation of the shrines. Okay. As well as the practice of loud dhikr, qawali, wajd. Is innovative. Deoband's curriculum combined the study. Okay. Oh, Taqi Usmani is a famous Deobandi. That's Taqi Usmani. Okay. Famous Deobandi scholar was trained. So I actually had debates with those guys I was talking about who were Deobandis. And this is the guy, they would bring up his tafsir. And anyways, so the most famous Deobandi scholar was trained in Chishti order, as were the other four founders of the Deobandi Madrasa. Mahmud Ashraf Usmani, nice fella, huh? The former head of Darul Uloom Karachi, defended the concept of tariqa and baya based on the pledge of the tree incident. Ashraf Ali Thanvi graduated from their school. He was an Indian scholar, widely considered as a preeminent Sufi of modern India. Founder of the Deobandi school, Muhammad Qasim Nanotwi, Rashid Ahmed Gangohi, were inspired by the doctrine of Shah Waliullah, among other sources of inspiration. Gangohi opposed the Sufi doctrine that Muhammad has knowledge of the unseen, ilm ghaib. This belief of the Deobandis conflict with traditional Sufi views of Muhammad having unparalleled, unequal knowledge that encompasses the unseen realm. Gangohi also issued multiple fatwas against the Mawlid and stated it as an innovation, bid'ah. The opposed and practice of standing up in honor of Muhammad during Mawlid. Zakaria Kandalawi, noted Hadith scholar and Sufi Sheikh of Deobandi, says that the reality of tasawwuf is merely correction of intention. It begins with actions are only considered to intentions and ends with you worship him, Allah, as if you see him. So, all right, so they have militism. Oh, Rashid Ahmed Gangohi as he was the chief justice, and Muhammad Qasim Nanotwi was the commander-in-chief. So, wow. So the Deobandi Jihadism pertains to a militant interpretation of Islam that draws upon the teachings of the Deobandi movement. The Deobandi movement underwent 3 waves of armed conflict. The first wave resulted in the establishment of Islamic territory centered on Tana Bawan by the movement's elders during the Indian Rebellion of 1857. Prior to the founding of Darul Uloom Deoband, Imdadullah Muhajir Makki served as the Amir al-Mu'minin of Islamic territory. Rashid Ahmed Gangohi, the Chief Justice. All right, so they all right, this is their territory. We have our own leader, and it's like a militant wing. However, following the British victory over the Deobandi forces in the Battle of Shamli, the territory fell. After the establishment of Darul Uloom Deoband, Mahmud Hassan Deobandi initiated the second wave. He attempted to mobilize an armed resistance against the British through various initiatives, including the formation of the Samrat al-Tarbiyat. When the British uncovered his Silk Letter movement, they arrested him and held him captive in Malta. Following the release, he and his followers entered mainstream politics and actively participated in the democratic process. In the late 1970s, Pakistan-Afghan border became the epicenter of the Deobandi jihadist movement's third wave, which was fueled by the Soviet-Afghan War. That was their third wave. Under the auspices of President Muhammad Zia-ul-Haq, its expansion occurred through various madrasas such as Darul Uloom Haqqaniya and Jamia al-Uloom al-Islamiyya, with political support provided by Jamiat ul-Islam. Trained militants from the Pakistan-Afghan border participated in the Afghan Jihad and later formed various organizations, including the Taliban. Very interesting. So, the guys that I was talking about were Deobandi. They escaped Taliban. Like the story, I'll just quickly say a story. So this person was telling me, I'm like, yo, if you're from that area, how did you end up to the area where I was in? It's far. So he said that when the war happened, a lot of the Taliban came to those areas, northern areas in Pakistan, and then they started threatening the people. So he used to work at a bank, and they came, took some guys, and like probably killed them. And then they said, "We're gonna come back for you guys." So him and his friends were freaking out. One of his friends was praying so much, like he was in like a constant state of prayer, because they had said, "We're gonna come and slaughter you like lambs at any point, day or night." So these guys were like, "We are gonna get slaughtered by Taliban day or night at any point in time." And then what happened is that they, one of them showed up. They came back and said, "Follow me." And then he took them to a place and said, "You guys are gonna walk that way and keep walking, and I'm gonna look the other way." He said, "Don't look back, just keep going, don't stop." And that's how he escaped that area. So one Talib had it in his heart to let these guys go. And then he's since had family, kids, a good life, decent life, you know, and we support his family till this day, even though they deem us kafir, and they're actually others in Pakistan, like people that know of him, question them, "How are you working for Ahmadis, Qadianis, or kafir?" Like, and he tells them, to them, for them, their religion, for me, mine. So he has this kind of policy. So anyways, it's interesting how the movement that he belongs to actually had a militant wing, which later formed Taliban, like parts of the Taliban, which almost got him killed. Tablighi Jamaat, a non-political Deobandi missionary. So these guys are very active. They're in over 200 countries, millions of followers, and they're in politics. They have militant wings. I can tell these names. These are like TDP. Don't tell me TLP. What is TLP? Which one is this? Are they Barelvis? Yep, most of them belong to Barelvis. These guys are very bad news. Anyways, bad news bears. So we got these three stooges. So Rashid Ahmed Gangohi was one of the founders of Deoband, and it's the largest movement. Just put up some big numbers. Spread out. It's 15 to 30% of Pakistan is Deoband. Then it's Barelvis, I believe. 200 million followers. Then I think it's Al-Hadis. And I think that's why we saw the numbers that we did. Oh, no. Yes, 25 are run by Barelvis and Al-Hadis and 3% Shia. All right. So Rashid Ahmed Gangohi, the Deobandi scholar. Now we kind of know. Now we kind of know where. Yeah, it's 1:11 a.m. Probably the latest I've streamed. But I'm on a roll here. And I just cracked open a can of sparkling water. So I'll finish this and finish the stream. So Rashid Ahmed Gangohi, I want to get some of the book. I didn't get into the book last time, and now I've like learned so much about the history of this area and these people. Not everything, but like enough to know who this person is and what context they were in. So he's a leading figure of the Deobandi jurist. His lineage reached back to Abu Ayyub al-Ansari, who was and Yathrib from the tribe of Banu Najr, and a close companion, the standard bearer of the Islamic prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Along with Muhammad Qasim Nanotwi, he was a pupil of Mamluk Ali Nanotwi. Both studied the books of Hadith under Shah Abdul Ghani Mujaddidi and later became Sufi disciples of Haji. So these guys are Deobandi. They have Sufi, like they believe in Sufism, and they believe in Taqlid, which is the following of the schools of thought, and they're unlike the Al-Hadis who reject them and reject the Brelvis for the same reasons and say that no, we should follow our own kind of understanding of this stuff based on Quran and Hadith. And so like they're doing a lot of Hadith interpretation. Anyways, and those guys, like, then there's also like the Wahhabi aspect of it as well. So his lectures on Sahih al-Bukhari and Jami' Tirmidhi were recorded by his students Muhammad Yahya Kandalawi, later edited, arranged, and commented on by Zakaria Kandalawi and published. Okay. In Tazkiratul Rashid, his name and nasab is given as follows. Rashid Ahmed. Okay, whatever, bro. Can we get some more details that are relevant? So he was born in 1826. British India, Uttar Pradesh. He was born in the Mohalla of Sarai, close to the tomb of Abdul Qudus Gangohi, who was also an Indian scholar. Both his father, Maulana Hidayat Ahmed, and his mother, Karimun Nisa, belonged to Ansari Ayubi families, claiming descendants from Abu. Okay, his ancestral village was Rampur, but his grandfather, Qazi Bir Baksh, had settled in Gango. So his father was also an Islamic scholar and died at the age of 35 when Rashid was only 7. A few years later, Rashid's younger brother, Sayyid Ahmed, also died at the age of 9. After the death of Hidayat Ahmed, the responsibility of upbringing fell to his grandfather, Qazi Bir Baksh. He also had 4 maternal uncles. Okay, bro. Looks like he became blind at some point. Oh, nice. Fatwa regarding Ahmadis. Rashid Ahmed Gangohi pronounced Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmed a deceiver, Dajjal, and his followers kuffar. Thank you. Ahmadis maintained as having died in a consequence of Mubala, a foreshadowing. All right. That is the cue to get back to the reply to the doubts. Now, let's see. The doubts. Sorry, I got to go back a little bit to see, was the doubts laid out here or? Oh, okay. So yeah. So these are first time we're reading of his doubts, and so he's dealing with. Okay, so I remember this format. Okay. Let's see how many pages it is. 498 to don't usually look that far up, but I just want to see. Probably not gonna get through this tonight. We have I'm leaving for Jalsa tomorrow, inshallah. So the American US Jalsa is here this weekend, so won't have time to stream this week. So I'm just trying to get this out of the way to get some momentum. All right, so looks like this is actually the last DN. Wow, love that. 541. So we'll do half of it right now. Actually, what time is it, man? How long has this stream been going? Might just end it. Wow, I'm almost 4 hours in. Where did the time go? No, that's not possible. No, it's 2 hours, bro. Why does it say minus 354? Yeah, almost 2 hours. Okay, YouTube is bugging. So I'm coming up on 2 hours, and this is about 40 pages. I'm itching to get into this, and this is the last stream for this week. All right, you know what? Let's just start reading a little bit. In this book, the author has tried desperately to disprove my claim. I mean, this person, there's a mobile against him, spiritual duel. So this is very important, and it ends off with this. So I think we're almost actually done this book. Oh my God, yes, we will be done. You know what? I'm sorry, guys. Like, we didn't read any of this book. But our next stream will wrap this up, and we'll get into it. And let me go. It's like 1:20 a.m. I need to be getting up in a few hours. So I will end the stream right there, actually. Inshallah, next time we will actually, for real, now that we know who Rashid Ahmed Gangohi is, the founder, one of the founders of the Deobandi movement, who are huge, and they kind of lead the like all the madrasas and stuff in the UK, in Pakistan, and in the subcontinent. So it's a force to be reckoned with. And so definitely looking forward to this matchup. Man, I'm looking at this and I want to read it. Like, this is super exciting. Okay, let me just quickly read this. In this book, the author has tried desperately to disprove my claim. Interesting. So concept of the Mahdi and Messiah. It's likely an Arabic work. How interesting that when you Google this book, it doesn't even show up. Come on, Rashid. Does it say a list of his books here? It doesn't even, like, this guy is a co-founder of one of the largest sects of Islam. And his Wikipedia doesn't even like mention his books. And this references to us. His biographical works include Yad Daran. Okay, there's biographies on him, but where's his books? कादियानी के खिलाफ हजरत गंगोई का फतवा. Okay. Where are your books, homie? الخطاب الملي في تحقيق المهدي والمسيح. Okay. It's apparently a collection of his absurdities. This book is utterly untenable, baseless, and full of absurd notions and fabrications. I know that there is no need to refute it at all, and anyone who has basic knowledge of the Holy Quran and Hadith does not require a refutation to be written. However, since I have heard that Maulvi Rashid's followers in the vicinity of Saharanpur hold this book in great esteem and read it, apparently it's not even on his Wikipedia, with it much reverence, considering it to be a memorable relic of his lifetime. I thought it appropriate that in order to save such people from being misled, answers be given to some of the more significant objections that have caused the ignorant and unlearned people of the area to fall into a pit of misguidance and take pride in this book, which is a compilation of falsehoods. Man, this book is drawing me towards it, but I have to sleep. So I will end the stream there. Inshallah, we'll actually start the last bit of this book, and super excited. So thank you so much for those who watch the stream. Like and subscribe and share. And inshallah, next week, same channel, we will finish Barahin-e-Ahmadiyya part 5. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.